Welcome to Sex and Happiness with Laurie Handlers. Amazing sex and intimacy are just around the corner. While Laurie puts the finishing touches on her new book, Sex and Happiness Over 60, please enjoy this show. It's one of her favorites from the Sex and Happiness archives.
One of my most exciting topics will be covered today, and I haven't known how to talk about this, and you may not either, so that's why this topic is enlightening. We're going to be talking about Asperger's syndrome, which is a neurological something that happens in the brain. Of course, we're going to hear more about what the something is that happens in the brain and causes people to have a different syncopation with things that happen in life. It's hard for people with Asperger's to connect. They always seem a little bit out of sync with what's happening. If a joke is told, they may laugh after the joke. When it's time to take part in a conversation, it's sometimes difficult for people with Asperger's to know exactly what to say, and so they feel isolated and sometimes very stuck. And they may not know what it is, and for years, people may have thought this is some kind of a psychological thing, but it turns out it's a neurological thing, and we're going to really hear about it. Why I'm so excited about it is not only that I've known about Asperger's syndrome as a result of being a Tantra teacher, but I've seen how Tantra has affected various people around me who I consider to have Asperger's syndrome, whether they know it or not. My guest today knows something about it. He struggled with Asperger's and didn't know it. It was undiagnosed. He recently told me that he had it, and I said, oh, finally I can have a conversation with someone so they could really let us know what it's about and how Tantra has affected him and this syndrome. So I'm excited. It's a very hot topic, and it's something that affects more people than we know, and Tantra may have a tremendous effect towards it. So that's what we're talking about today. My guest is Shivananda Deva. He is an ITT project manager. He's an acting teacher, and he's also a leader of transformational seminars. In addition, he's a photographer, and he's also a musician. And he and I have known each other for years and years. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being with me today, talking about this great topic.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so good to talk to you again.
So I want to, first of all, since I've mentioned Asperger's syndrome, and we've talked about it a little bit, can you shed some light on what exactly this is and just exactly when you were diagnosed?
Well, I personally was just diagnosed very recently. It's something that has really only come to the public attention in the last 15 years or so. It first really came to my attention just over a year ago, and in a very unusual circumstance. I was at my mother's funeral, and the pastor who was giving the funeral address mentioned that my mother was someone who had Asperger's syndrome. And after the service, I went to my brothers and said, "What's this all about? Tell me more." And they said, yes, she had actually been diagnosed about 9 years previously by a national expert, and that was so. And I didn't think a lot about it. I did a little reading, but it certainly explained some things about my mother's behavior. My mother and I always had a challenging relationship. She was very distant. She was not easy for her to express anything to me except criticism. So that sort of was the character of our relationship. And she was also, the world would say she was eccentric because she lived in a beautiful house, but it was always filled with clutter. Stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff. And she was a food hoarder.
Well, I got to say something to you, though, here, because a lot of people would say that their parents were exactly like that. Their parents only had negative things to say about them, and lots of people I know, parents are hoarders. Actually, I even have friends who they buried their mother with a whole bunch of stuff because they didn't know what to do with it. So they put it in the coffin.
In my mother's case, that would have had to have been, about 27 boxes of yellow cake mix. But but so that was chapter 1. Actually, one of my brothers sent me a book about it, and characteristically, I proceeded to lose the book, and haven't found it since. So I haven't read that book that he sent me. But then the second thing came. So I have my own piles. But it gave me a little something to think about. But what really drove it home was literally just a couple of months ago, I found out that my grandson had been diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, clinically diagnosed. And he's a young teenager, and was diagnosed as a result of having some difficulties in school.
Tell me what the characteristics are. I mean, like you said your mother was on the negative side. I don't really experience you on the negative side. So what would you say the characteristics were for you? And what are some that may overlap with your grandson?
Okay. Well, I think that the fact that they're moving to this idea of a spectrum disorder is part of it, because it can manifest in many different ways in different people. And how it manifested for me was that I had very high intelligence,
right?
Had a lot of obvious talents in a lot of areas. I was very precocious, verbally, skipped a grade when I was in grammar school, but I was always kind of an outsider socially. I wasn't able to connect well. Other kids didn't like to play with me. And I actually exhibited one of the textbook case examples of one of the ways this can manifest. Because in the third grade, I would blurt out in class and interrupt my teacher and correct something that she had just said. I would.
In third grade, you did this?
Yeah. And I would. It's something that is known within this area as the little professor syndrome, where I would literally say, no, not Istanbul, it was Constantinople. And then the other kids would all laugh. The teacher would be embarrassed. And
right.
To check, they'd find out that I was right.
Yeah, of course you were.
Yeah, so I had a precocious talent for remembering all kinds of trivia, and I read voraciously, so I knew a lot of stuff.
Now, I want to ask you something. This is how it occurs to me. So I want to try and, because I do know other people with Asperger's, and they might or might not have been diagnosed. But this is how they're occurring for me, like dealing with people who I feel have what I understand to be Asperger's. And so I try to imagine what it's like for me. I don't know if as a kid you ever had a sister or an occasion to play jump rope, like to jump in when somebody was spinning and already jumping. Is that something that you ever did? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and I remember watching girls do that, and I can't recall whether I did that or not, but it always looked like something I wouldn't be able to do.
You're always looking for the in, like when you're playing double, when you're jumping double, two people are turning the rope, and you're trying to jump in. And I imagine it's hard sometimes for someone to catch that beat and jump in. And that's what I liken to Asperger's. To some people that I know, they just have the timing is so off, like they might make a remark that either is a non sequitur, it doesn't have anything to do with what's just happening, or they make a remark, but the remark comes so much later, or the laughter of the joke comes so much later that they miss the beat to jump in to the turning jump rope. Is that clear? Does that feel what it's like?
Yeah, and yes, and that kind of social ineptness is one of the common hallmarks of people with Asperger's. And there are people who've been very successful with Asperger's. I mean, Bill Gates is known to be Aspergian. And
say that again. What's the word? Aspergian?
Yeah. Aspergian, yeah.
Aspergian.
I don't know if that's a real word, but it should be.
Yeah, it's great.
And he was notably, very, very awkward and inept socially when he was younger. And the problem is that this is a genetic disorder. It is a neurological slight, I'm not going to say miswiring, let's just say different wiring.
Different wiring, yeah, different.
It's different wiring, and
okay.
it lends itself to certain kinds of abilities that not everybody has, but in social circumstances, it means that you literally a little off the beat, and sometimes it can be even, not just a matter of somebody tells a joke and you get it 30 seconds later. It could be literally somebody tells something terrible that just happened, some tragedy, some calamity, and you respond by laughing.
I see.
Why?
I see what you mean.
Without knowing their internal dialogue, you wouldn't know that what they were reacting to was a very rapid fire, oh, that's terrible. Oh, I'm glad it didn't happen to me. Oh, I'm safe. I'm okay. And the response to that is to laugh.
I want to tell you something. I was teaching a class, I don't know, in the 90s sometime, late 90s, maybe 2000. And I was teaching a leadership course. And I told everybody when they were going on break, we were going to have like a 10-minute break. And I said on the break, I didn't want anybody to eat on this break. Like I didn't want this to be like a snack break. And I said, we're going to have a 10 minutes break. Please go to the bathroom if you need to go to the bathroom and drink water and come back. Please don't eat anything. No eating anything. And a person raised their hand and said, will we be punished? And I said, what? And this person said, will we be punished?
Yeah.
And I said, no, no. There's no punishment. And I was so taken aback. And that was my first experience with somebody in what we're talking about right now, who I consider to have Asperger's. My first experience of somebody like giving me a response that was so literal and so over the top, which is just what you just said. Oh, thank goodness that didn't happen to me. Thank goodness I'm still alive. I'm happy. Ha ha ha. Will we be punished? I said, no, my course isn't about punishment. I'm just like, it's very scary, freaky for me. And then I learned, I thought it was psychology. My thing was I looked at everything through a psychology paradigm. And then I met somebody in Philadelphia, a woman named Tina Caterino, who's a tremendous expert on neurology. And she explained all this neurological stuff to me. And all these people in my life, so many people, started to make more sense to me than I had ever imagined before, ever. And then I come to find out about you, and thank you, by the way, because you're the first person that's ever discussed this with me openly.
Yeah, and we just got into it recently, and we've known each other a long time. But
right.
But when you think about it, just when we were chatting before the show, it kind of explains a couple of unusual experiences that we had together.
It does. It really, really does. It's.
And here's the thing. I would say that the general public shares your initial view that this was psychological, that this was a personality disorder, maybe, that this was in worse. Much of the world really treats it like you're just you're just a goof off. You could manage your life differently if you just had the willpower to stop, being such a wimp about
or stop
the
cutting
things that
up
everybody takes.
or something.
Yeah. Whereas, here's an interesting thing. One of the foremost experts on autism and Asperger syndrome and author of The Unwritten Rules of Social Relationship is Dr. Temple Grandin. And she's autistic herself. She's a PhD. She's internationally known as a cow whisperer. She really understands cow psychology. And one of the things that she says about any of the autism-related syndromes is that the reason that autistic people seem to get better over life is because they learn. And the challenge with Asperger's, to me, the central challenge is that I don't have the same wiring to understand social interactions than most people do. And so I misinterpret things. Sometimes I overread. I'll have...
Well, you talked about that in a love affair. You talked to me about that in a love affair that you had for a long time, that you misread the symbols. You misread the signals, sorry. And you made things mean different things than what was actually being presented to you, no?
Exactly. And frankly, when it was all over, people were like, well, what did you expect? The handwriting was on the wall, and it was like, it was? I didn't see it.
Right.
And I literally didn't.
Yeah, everyone saw it. Everybody saw it. But, nobody made you wrong for that, though. Sometimes people make somebody wrong. You know why no one made you wrong? I just put it together. You were in this relationship for a few years. And sometimes people, when they see a friend or a loved one suffering in a relationship, after a while, after the handwriting's been on the wall, their friends and relatives start to make them wrong. Like, get out already. Nobody made you wrong, Shivananda, because you didn't complain. You just didn't get it, that it was so off.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
You just didn't get it, so nobody made you wrong. They just figured, okay, you were going along for the ride. Maybe you were a sucker, or maybe whatever. There were obviously some payoffs for you, but the payoffs, but you gave a lot more than you got.
Yeah, and I would even say, let's take a simple example, not that one. I was introduced to a lovely woman. We spent a few months getting to know each other. We went out to dinner. So our first time out to dinner, and we had been in various party and social situations. We chatted with each other. We went out to dinner. The dinner went so wonderfully well that I was practically, ready to propose marriage, by 2:00 in the morning.
Oh, no.
I was just like, man, I had a whole future written for this relationship. The first time we'd ever just been out, one-to-one.
Right.
And it really threw her. It threw her to the extent, because she had no way of processing that. She was like, in her world, I just showed up kind of like a fruitcake. And it just pushed her away. Now, later we worked that out and we became friends, but it certainly ended any chances of, any kind of romantic relationship. Because she was worried.
Timing really is an important part of human interaction. And I could see how this neurological synapse that's different could throw your timing so off. That's something that could actually have become very serious just based on timing, like off timing, reading the signals differently could cost the whole thing in a romance. and change it into something else. That's just so, listen, there's a television character or two with Asperger's on one of my old favorite shows. Used to be on Boston Legal. There was a character, one of the attorneys named Jerry. And he used to, they built him to be somebody brilliant in the show and somebody who just, he would yell things out in the court.
Yeah.
And he would also hold his hands funny when he walked, and his tie would be funny, but he wasn't a bad looking guy. And he actually had a relationship on the show. He had a relationship with someone on the show who, I don't know what her role was, but she had intimacy with her clock. And they understood that between each other. And they didn't, they didn't make it too weird, like they actually gave him importance on the show. So I think that show gave importance to a lot of things that were probably issues that people needed to look at. And that was one of it. It came to me just as soon as I heard about Asperger's. All of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, there's a person on the show with that. And there's an actor acting that out. And I thought it was so great to bring to people's awareness. Yeah, it's amazing. I think, people around me, by the way, just in terms of my own life, many, many people around me, people specifically who've come to me from Tantra, like they've been my students at one time and then they end up going through my leadership course called Leadership, Integrity, and Service to be on my staff, have congregated about me. People who really assist my courses, who think really outside the box. Brilliant, brilliant people who don't communicate that well. They either communicate too fast and are too smart for other people and are very inappropriate in the things that they yell out or the things they raise their hand with in the class, or people who just really provide an amazing service for my participants in my classes. When I look at them, when I look back, I've got to say there have been 5 to 7 people around me for a long time that are on this spectrum that you're talking about. And how I know it is because this woman I just mentioned to you before, my friend who at the time was living in Philadelphia, now she's in upstate New York, Tina Caterino. She's so astute about this. She came to my bliss course and my ecstasy course and she looked around her and she said, oh my goodness, everybody assisting this course has Asperger's. And they do so well with Laurie. She has so much room for that. I always figured they were just a little bit different. And they just did such great work. They made such huge contributions. Their service was so clear. Their brilliance is so clear to me.
Yeah, but your perspective in life is not the average. And a lot of the problems that people with Asperger's have in everyday life, in going to work and having a relationship and doing what everybody has to do in life, is that most people are not that understanding, and most people are put off by anything that's, off-center enough that they don't understand it. They don't understand why you're saying something inappropriate to them. They don't understand why, when it's clear the conversation is going in one direction, that you ask a question that doesn't seem to have any relationship to anything, or whatnot. And so I really have to say, I struggled through, most of my adult life in trying to fit in to, the normal American business culture, and always being kind of the odd man out, kind of the odd duck, even despite the fact that I don't have any, I don't have fangs, I don't have, any obvious, but. You're
a wonderful man. Get out of here. You're attractive, you're vibrant, you're vital, and you're a wonderful man. You don't have fangs. And there are times you seemed a little competitive. There are times that you do seem a little competitive, like you know more than whoever it is speaking. Sometimes that was me. And and then there's this other thing, this skip a beat, which I had no idea about it. It's amazing. It's amazing to discover, and it makes sense. I'm so glad you found out. So, Shivananda, tell us, I know that you've done transformational work, and I know that this helped you, and perhaps this would help other people who may be hearing this program. So, how did you start with transformation? Where did you go, and what drove you to it, and what did you get?
Well, I would say it started, my whole life, I've tried to understand what it was that was the secret that everybody else got told, at the party that I wasn't invited to. So I always felt like if I could find out that secret, then I could be an insider too. So, from a young age, I was interested in all kinds of self-help books and all of that stuff. But, as anybody who's gotten into the self-help genre at all, I think that you would have to agree. After a while, you start realizing that it's not really getting at the root. It's sort of like, I heard somebody say once, it's like painting over rust. It just doesn't, it just doesn't get to what the issue is. It kind of spiffies everything up, and you got a smile on your face for a while, but it just doesn't get at what's the core.
Right. It doesn't. Right. It doesn't fix things. It doesn't make you more comfortable. It's like another facade.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't reach deep enough.
And then, in the late 80s, I had the very, very good fortune of having a member of my family do the forum. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and he did the forum. He had my mother do the forum. And then I was the last person in the family that he talked to about it. But
I just want to let people know that you're talking about the Landmark Forum that is offered by Landmark Education, and you and I have that in common. And we both have being in staff at Landmark on common as well. So in the late 80s, right. You did the forum.
Yeah, and that was a very important step for me because it really got me present. That was where I really was able to take a step out of living in my own head all the time and just be present to life. So that was an important step.
And to other people, life and to other people. I mean, the Landmark Forum lets you know how out of touch you are with other people and the story that you live in. And I don't mean you, the story that we made up and we act out of it and it becomes our story and we make it the truth and we relate to the whole world out of the story instead of being present to what's actually happening. So that's great. It's really great that you did. So it was the late 80s when you did it in LA.
Yeah, exactly. And then I worked with it in LA. Then mid 90s, I moved to Seattle and I continued with that work in Seattle. And, and it was great. And I'm still great friends with people from all the way back then. And I'm still, participate, to a certain degree with that work even today. And I'm matter of fact, just enrolled a good friend in the forum because I could really see it was something that would contribute to his life.
And I want to also say that, so people know, the Landmark Forum is a training program. It's an experiential training program that's 3 days and an evening. And it really makes a difference in a person's life. It's a short program that can switch people's whole world around, their whole way of seeing things around. My whole family's done it. Most of my friends have done it. Most of the people who ever staff my programs that I offer have done it. Most of the people who go through my Tantra programs have done it, including you.
Yes.
And that's initially how we connected, you and I. That's how we connected.
Yes, even before Tantra.
Yes.
So here's the thing about that. I have an enormous appreciation for that work. I'm an enormous fan of that work. And I would say that there were some areas of my life that it didn't touch, or probably more accurate to say didn't touch to the degree that I wanted them to. And
what were those areas?
I would say that would be specifically around spirituality, around sex, and around love.
Right.
That work certainly has a remarkable effect on one's relationships and so on. But it just in terms of my own experience, there was something missing, and I just couldn't get my hands on it. And I happened to see that the famous tantric author and teacher Margot Anand was teaching a weekend class in Seattle, and I had just broken up a relationship of several years, or rather, she had just broken it up, and I was really in the inquiry of what was missing for me as a man to be able to hold a relationship with a woman that I loved. That was a woman that I loved, and I had every intention of marrying her and being with her, and
it's a good inquiry. And so, it's a really good and straight and honest inquiry. What would be up for you that would be able to hold the relationship? And Landmark didn't give you the answer.
Yeah. It didn't give me the answer. It might have given somebody else the answer, but it didn't give me the answer. And this began to turn up a corner on that. And so I really was able to see that there was something up for me in that. And so shortly after that, I moved to the East Coast, and I was
wait a second. In terms of your languaging, when you said something was up for you in that, what does that mean? Can you translate that? What was up for you? What did you see?
Well, one of the things that I saw was that I had this outsider conversation with the women that I was in relationship with. In other words, I could be with a woman who was saying she loved me, and in my heart of hearts, I knew that I just had her fooled, and that if she ever figured out who I really was, she'd be out of there in a minute. So what does that point to? That points to self-love. I did not love myself.
And you felt isolated even when you were included.
Yeah, and because I didn't understand it. I didn't know how I was supposed to behave. I was always on tiptoes, waiting to make the fatal mistake.
Oh, my goodness. But I want to let you know something, that even people without Asperger's feel this way too. This just seems like it's more extended or more tenuous, but other people, just a lot of people feel like that. They just don't know if they're in, even when they're in. They can't imagine. They think they're doing it with smoke and mirrors.
Right. And in the case of those with Asperger's, it's more that's heightened, because you fundamentally don't understand social interactions. So some people are notable for being unable to read facial expressions or body language. They just don't get it. I'm more in the middle on that one. But, in terms of things that people would say and do and so on, it would be easy for me to misinterpret, what our relationship was. So that first little weekend class that I did kind of cracked the shell a little bit, and then when I got to the East Coast, I took a number of courses. I really looked around to see who was available and took a number of courses. in a fairly short period of time. And each one of them kind of brought me, opened the shell a little more, let me out of the shell a little more. And then I met Laurie Handlers of Butterfly Tantra.
And I took a hammer to your shell.
You took a hammer to my shell. You sure did. We were both enjoying the thought of that very first course that I did with you, and just God, how far I've come since then. But
so much.
Here's
I'm
what
so
I would say. Here's
so
the
proud
way
of you.
I
I'm so
would.
excited. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Here's what I would say about what happened in that journey and in the work that we did together was that I was finally able to connect with people in a very deep, profound way, and that my heart really opened, that I was finally able to express my love for people, my deep, deep love for people, and my inner joy in a way that people could get it. So now we're connected very deeply because they're getting who I really am. I'm not that outer shell, that protective shell that would interact in certain ways because of some of my experiences in life. But they would really get down to the essential me and really be able to see how much I love them, how much I appreciate them. And I would be able to open my mouth and express that freely and openly in a way that would move people. Well, that's had a profound effect on my life.
It really is a huge difference. It's a huge difference. I mean, even talking to you now, as opposed to then, whenever then was, maybe 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and then some. Even speaking with you now, it's different. It's a very different. It's a different experience for me, and I imagine it's different for people who have known you. Your heart cracked open in Tantra, and you were able, and then you said, I cracked you open. Your heart cracked open, and you were able to...
me open.
And you were able... Look, I remember, because when I came to New York, there was a lot of people in a different kind of Tantra who wanted to just make nicey-nicey, and they wanted to feel each other viscerally. They wanted to touch each other and just do loving touches. And I said, no, there's much deeper layers we have to go to. And people made fun of me. They said I was the drill sergeant of New York, of Tantra in New York. You were probably one of them. So
I remember.
So I don't care. I mean, I like having that reputation because I know that I made people go deeper. Because if they didn't go deeper, they were going to be trying to have pleasure on top of a toxic waste dump called stored toxic cellular memories. And
Exactly.
People are trying to make love and have a great time, and they're not having such a great time. They're in pretense about it because there is so much going on in that sex area that has to do with memories of other things. Memories of being rejected. Memories of someone saying no. And you must have had a lot of them based on Asperger's that you didn't even know about. You weren't getting to square one with people. So it's amazing. Your heart cracked open and you were able to express your deepest love and feeling for other people and be gotten, like be accepted, be received. This is amazing. Now, talk a little bit about, you told me this amazing experience, which I want you to share, about being in the 60s when people were, into peace and love. And then you recently had an experience where it was totally different for you. Not necessarily based on the times, but based on you. So what was that like? I love this. I love this.
Well, I've been a photographer for my whole adult life. Ever since my daughter was born, I wanted to take pictures of my little 4-pound little preemie daughter. And I've been a professional photographer most of that time. In the in the 60s and 70s, I was thoroughly immersed in the hippie culture, and I mean, I always worked. That was one difference that I had.
So by day you were a straight corporate worker, and by weekends you were a hippie.
Yeah. So, but I had long hair and a beard and wore beads and bell bottoms, the whole thing, and I would go to the beans in the park. Yeah. Jeez, man. But, I would go to the park, for the beans, and I would walk around taking pictures because it's something I've always enjoyed doing. And I would get in the middle of all the peace and love and the herbal mist in the air, I would get people who suspected what I was up to and were hostile towards me. And I got confronted a couple of times of people who accused me of being a narc. and
that was the worst thing then that you could say to anybody.
Yeah, the worst. Talk about an attack on somebody's self-identity. And I even had to beat a hasty retreat on a couple of occasions just to avoid, a really unpleasant situation. Now, I live in Austin, Texas now, and I'm one of the traditions in Austin is what's called Eeyore's birthday, which is.
Is it could you spell that? Spell your.
Yeah, Eeyore, like Winnie the Pooh, and Eeyore, Eeyore.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not a Winnie the Pooh person. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, this has been. Who knows? I don't even know where this started, but this year was the 47th annual holding of this party, which was a be-in the park. And, an occasion to go be with thousands of people who are wearing tie-dyes and face paint and, colorful clothes and beating on drums and just enjoying
and some of them not clothed.
Some of them not clothed. Yeah, that's another tradition. And, I would say, it's a predominantly a fairly young group, but it's a very, what's neat about it is that it's a non-ironic remembrance of the hippie era. And people are really there just really kind of celebrating that whole vibe. And I'm there, just sort of dressed like a civilian, but I did have a drum over my shoulder. I was
and a
wearing
camera.
And a camera. And I'm taking pictures, and I'm taking pictures every place that I go. And as the day wore on, it struck me how different my experience was taking pictures at this be-in, which was as close a reproduction as people could come up with today to, the one that they started with 47 years ago. And I really got it. At one point, I took a woman's picture, and she was smiling, she was beaming at me, and she came over and kissed me. And she stepped back and she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I love you," and kissed me again, and then just, walked on by. And I thought, well, that was remarkable. And then I got it. I actually got what was going on, because every other person that I'd taken the picture in their own way was expressing the same thing. What was the difference? I was different. I was a completely different human being in that environment. When I was taking pictures, my appreciation for who they were went out before me. They really got my love and appreciation for who they were being. So when I took their picture, it was like me kissing them.
Yeah, you were kissing them through the camera. You were no longer not included. You were no longer on the fringe.
I was no longer
the voyeur. You were no longer the voyeur. You were actually with them.
Yeah, I called it the watcher. In the 60s,
the what?
I was the watcher. I was on the outside looking in. And in this, but in this occasion, I was on the inside generating the very thing that they were there for, which was, love and appreciation and, just joy.
And to be seen
joy of
also,
being alive.
to be seen. People want to be seen. They want to be seen as who they are. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
What a description. And it's 40 some odd years later from when you were originally a hippie. I hate being so dated about that, but I guess it's 40 something years later
Laurie,
from me.
Laurie,
when I was a hippie. Yeah.
Yeah, Laurie, it's okay. Getting older is better than the alternative.
Listen, I'm physically immortal, so I'm not even debating that. I live in a community of people staying around forever. So as I get older, I just get better and better and better. So I love this about this conversation with you. I love what happened for you. I'm so thankful that you came to Tantra. I'm so thankful that you noticed that there was a missing for you in intimacy. Even after you did the great work of Werner Erhard at Landmark Education, you still had more to go, and hopefully you haven't stopped. I mean, there's always more to go. It's just great that Tantra was able to play such a nice part in having you open your heart, like crack your heart open.
And it's so great because the things that you teach are things that are really very, very valuable for solo practice, for being able to keep yourself, in tune and in shape, even when you're cut off, let's say, from a community of like-minded people. For whatever reason, you're traveling or you're in a strange part of the world or something.
And that would be me.
But kind of where I've been. I haven't been really part of a community for several years, but I've been able to carry on the things that support me. The breathing and the energy work that one can continue to do solo. And you said it yourself. I'm not the same person today that I was the last time we were together.
Right. Beautiful. Well, we're winding down. I just want to thank you again. I want to thank you for being on the show and being so overt about talking about Asperger's. I've waited for this moment, so I just want to let you know it just happens to be you, and I'm grateful that you could shed light on it for people and let people know that there are things they can do that are not medication.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that they can do that will open them up to be present and then have their heart be open and find ways to express what's in their deepest heart. So, Shivananda Deva, thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for coming into my life when you did and smacking that hammer on the eggshell.
If you want to find out more about Shivananda Deva, I would let you know that you should start to go to meetup groups in the Austin, Texas area. Facebook, you can find him Shivananda Deva on Facebook, so please find him there. I want to let you know that you can follow me on Facebook, you can follow me on Twitter. Of course, you can get my book and my CD and my DVD and all those things, and I'd love to have you at the next screening, wherever it will be, of Tantric Tourists. Thank you so much for listening to the show today, and I can't wait to be back with you.